Longer walls that cannot cage the heart. The first time Mara saw her, she was standing in the prison yard with her face turned toward the sky, eyes closed like she was trying to remember what sunlight felt like before it became something rationed and controlled. It was an ordinary Tuesday morning inside the gray concrete walls of Whitmore Correctional Facility, where ordinary moments had long stopped existing. But something about that woman, standing so still amid the chaos of shouting inmates and clanging metal doors, made the entire world around Mara go quiet. She did not know then that this stranger, this woman named Elena, would become the reason she started breathing again. She did not know that love, the most inconvenient and unstoppable force in the universe, had just walked into the most unlikely place it had ever chosen to exist. Mara had been inside for 3 years by the time Elena arrived. 3 years of counting ceiling tiles in the dark, of writing letters she never sent to a mother who had stopped visiting after the 2nd year, of learning how to make herself small and invisible in a place that already treated her like she didn't matter. She had come in at 26, convicted of a financial crime tied to a man she had trusted with her entire life, a man who had walked free while she served time for decisions she had believed were legal, decisions he had guided her into making. The injustice of it had hardened her in places she used to keep soft. She had learned not to hope for things. She had learned not to want. And yet here was this woman in the yard, tilting her face toward the sun like she still believed the world owed her warmth, and something ancient and tender inside Mara cracked open without permission. Elena had been transferred from a facility 2 states away, and the rumors about her arrived before she did. Some inmates said she had been a schoolteacher. Others said she had fought back against someone who deserved to be fought, that she had protected someone who could not protect themselves, and that the law had punished her for it the way it always punished women who refused to accept what was being done to them. Nobody seemed to know the full truth, and Elena herself was not the kind of person who offered explanations easily. She carried her story behind her eyes, and it showed in the careful, measured way she moved through the world, like someone who had been burned badly enough to learn the exact distance she needed to keep from every open flame. They were assigned to the same work detail in the prison laundry room, which meant 6 hours a day standing across from each other in clouds of steam, feeding institutional sheets into ancient pressing, machines that groaned and hissed like living things. The noise made conversation almost impossible, which suited both of them. But silence between 2 people who are quietly noticing each other is not really silence at all. It is a language with its own grammar and weight. Mara noticed that Elena folded everything with unusual precision, that she hummed without realizing she was doing it, that she laughed at something only once in the first 2 weeks. But when she did, it was full and unguarded, and it filled the laundry room like sunlight fills a room when someone finally pulls back the curtains. And something in Mara, something she had spent 3 years teaching to stay still and silent, lunged toward that sound with a longing that frightened her. Their first real conversation happened by accident on a rainy Wednesday afternoon, when the laundry machines broke down and they were left waiting in a small back room with nothing to do and nowhere to go. Elena picked up a torn paperback someone had left on a shelf and read the back cover, then handed it to Mara without saying anything. Mara read it and handed it back. Elena said she had read that book 3 times. Mara said she had never read it. Elena said that was going to change, and somehow, impossibly, within the bleak mechanics of that place, it did. Elena began leaving chapters of different books for Mara on the edge of the pressing table, marked with small folded corners at lines she thought Mara needed to read. And Mara began reading not just the pages, but the choices Elena made within them, understanding something about who this woman was through what moved her, what she underlined with her fingernail, what she returned to again and again. What grew between them did not have a name for a long time, because naming something makes it real, and real things inside a prison can be taken from you. They were careful the way people are careful when they are protecting something they cannot afford to lose. They found each other in corners of time that other people overlooked. During the 15 minutes after dinner, when the common room was loud enough to swallow a quiet conversation. During the slow walk from the chapel to the dormitory on Sunday mornings. during the brief, sacred overlap of their exercise schedules on Thursday afternoons. In those stolen fragments of time, they built something that had no walls, even though walls were everywhere. They talked about who they had been before this place, about the futures they were still tentatively holding on to even after everything, about the small specific things they missed, the sound of rain on a car roof, the smell of coffee in a real kitchen, the feeling of wearing your own clothes. They talked around the enormous, growing thing between them for weeks before either of them was brave enough to speak toward it directly. It was Elena who said it first, not with words but with action. One evening in the common room, Mara was sitting alone, reading a letter she had received that day from the attorney who had been reviewing her case, a letter that contained more disappointment than she had been prepared for. Her hands were shaking slightly, and she was pressing her lips together in the way she did when she was refusing to cry in a place where tears were never safe. Elena crossed the room without hesitation, sat beside her, and placed her hand over Mara's. She did not ask what was wrong. She did not say anything at all. She simply stayed, and Mara, who had spent 3 years holding herself together through sheer disciplined silence, felt something in her chest collapse into that warmth like a person finally sitting down after an unbearably long time of standing. She turned her hand over beneath Elena's and held on. After that, they stopped pretending. Not publicly, not loudly, not in ways that would invite danger or punishment, because they both understood the world they were living in, its rules and cruelties, and the particular vulnerability of two women loving each other inside a system that already viewed them as disposable. But between themselves, in the private country of their shared attention, they were honest. They were tender. Elena told Mara about the student she had protected, a teenage girl being abused by a faculty member, and how the system had twisted the story until Elena became the problem that needed to be removed. Mara told Elena about the man who had taken her career and her freedom and her best years and had gone on to start a new company in another city. They held each other's injustices with a kind of fury that felt clean, because it was not self-pity but witness, the act of truly seeing another person's wound and saying, "That should not have happened to you. And I am so sorry it did." Love in impossible circumstances does not look the way love looks in movies. It is not glamorous or easy or accompanied by music that tells you how to feel. It is a shared orange split carefully on a Tuesday. It is learning the exact sound of someone's breathing when they've fallen asleep in the dormitory so that, even in the dark, that they're still there. It is memorizing someone's laugh so thoroughly that you can hear it inside your own chest on the days you don't see them. It is choosing over and over again to give the softest parts of yourself to someone when the world around you is made entirely of hard surfaces. That is what Mara and Elena built together, slowly and deliberately and with full knowledge of how fragile it was. And fragile things, tended to with enough care and intention, can become the strongest structures in a person's life. The challenges did not disappear because they had found each other. Mara received 2 more disappointing letters from her attorney. Elena was disciplined unfairly by a guard who took issue with her dignity, the way she refused to shrink or apologize for taking up space. There were weeks when the weight of everything felt genuinely unsurvivable, when the distance between who they had been and who they were now felt too vast to cross, but they had each other to return to at the end of those weeks. And returning to someone is its own kind of miracle. Elena began writing again, long pieces that she shared only with Mara, about justice and womanhood and the specific texture of surviving.
Mara
began studying for her paralegal certification through the prison's continuing education program, a decision she said Elena had made seem possible simply by continuing to believe that the future was a place worth preparing for. 18 months after Elena's arrival, something shifted. A legal advocacy organization that had been reviewing cases like Mara's made contact through her attorney. The evidence she had fought to preserve, the documentation she had protected through 3 years of disappointment, was enough, slowly, painfully across months of legal proceedings, conducted in a world she could barely access from inside. Mara's conviction was overturned. She was going to be released. And the day they told her, she walked directly to the laundry room where Elena was working, because that was where this story had begun, and she stood in the doorway until Elena looked up, and neither of them said anything, For a long moment, because there was too much to say and not enough time to say it, Elena had 2 more years remaining on her sentence. 2 years is not nothing. 2 years between people who love each other is an enormous, real, painful thing. But Mara made promises in that laundry room doorway that she intended to keep. Not the desperate promises of someone terrified of losing something, but the calm, clear promises of someone who finally knew what they were willing to spend their life fighting for. She promised to find housing near the facility. She promised to attend every visitation she was permitted. She promised to keep building on the outside the life they had begun to design together in whispered conversations and shared paperback margins, so that when Elena walked out, there would already be something worth walking toward. The morning Mara left Whitmore, she stood in the prison yard for a long moment before passing through the final gate. She tilted her face toward the sky, eyes closed, the way Elena had been standing on the very first day, like she was trying to remember what sunlight felt like when it was fully yours. She understood now what Elena had been doing in that moment. She had been refusing to let this place convince her that warmth was something she no longer deserved. She had been practicing the radical act of receiving light, and Mara, standing in that yard for the last time, did the same. She breathed in. She carried Elena with her, and she walked out into a world that had taken so much from both of them, ready to begin the long, tender work of building something neither of them had ever been allowed to have before, a life that chose them back. If this story moved something in you, if it reminded you that love does not ask permission from circumstance and that human beings are capable of extraordinary tenderness even in the hardest places, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who believes in the power of love to survive anything. Your support helps these stories reach the hearts that need them most. Before we close, we want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us, have you ever experienced or witnessed love that found a way to exist where it seemed impossible? Your words might be exactly what someone scrolling through the comments needs to read today. Mara kept every promise she made, and 2 years later, on a Thursday afternoon when the light was doing something extraordinary across an ordinary parking lot, she was standing there waiting. When Elena walked through a different gate and into a life they had both survived long enough to share,